Welcome, everybody. I can't wait to dive into this amazing episode with everybody. So we've got Neme, Leaflade, and Kaspar here from RedCurry, who are going to talk to us a little bit more about their project and demystify a lot of the things around tokenization of real estate and what that really means and what they're really set out to do and the problems that they're looking to solve. Without any further ado, let's just start diving into things right away. And of course, I've got my business partner, Yoni, here with me as well to help dive deeper into some of these topics because he knows a lot more than I do about some of these things. Nime, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks. Pleasure to be here. Yep, my background goes actually. I'm coming from basically traditional world. In my previous life, I was managing small investment portfolios, doing betting and management, managing investments. And during my journey there, I met my dear co-founder Kaspar, who we started to dive into prop tech first, and then ended up pivoting into wealth management because we saw what kind of problems we ourselves are facing and everyone else seems to be facing, and what's the best way to start? To start to solve your own problems and then help others while doing that.
Yeah, that's the great thing about entrepreneurship. It's really just, the problems that you have, there's a 99% chance a lot of other people have that same problem. So by solving
Might
your
have
own
that, yeah, might
problems,
have that.
solving your own problems, you end up solving problems for a lot of the whole world. But
Yeah.
Casper, how about you, man?
Hey Ryan, hi Tony, nice, great to be here. So yeah, we started working with them quite many years ago. Actually, I was still in finishing my university. I started the first prop tech company and then a startup, and then I've been in tech my whole life and always related with real estate through studying civil engineering and then computer sciences. Then doing different things, mostly software related and in prop tech. And then one thing led to another. We ended up founding RedCurry, and kind of brings all these different sides of my previous experience together. So finances, property, software, obviously, and then now decentralized finance and decentralized technologies. So that's briefly where I come from into this. And in RedCurry, mostly I'm involved in product and the technology side of things. So trying to build the system in a way that's really is transparent and decentralized, not just talking about it, but actually building it.
Amazing. Okay, so let's just jump right into RedCurry. And before we dive deep into the project, I want to start off by giving the audience a very surface level understanding of what this is. So whoever is best suited to answer this, I'm throwing this out to both of you so you can fight over it if you want to. So really the first thing I want to know is if you could explain what RedCurry does to a 7-year-old in less than 2 sentences, what would you say?
The 7-year-old. Yeah, okay. Well, how I would explain, okay, my kid is 14-year-old, so how I would explain to him what daddy is doing. So I'm saying to him that I've explained to him a lot that we have to figure out that where we keep the money that grandparents are gifting you, etc., or you were getting during the birthdays. So, and then I end up explaining to him that fiat, well, obviously, actually, now at home I'm using with my kid, I'm already using the word fiat, actually, but let's say paper money or whatever we call it, coins, that how they lose value, literally. And that we are trying to create something that you can actually save in, that appreciates over time instead of losing value. So to my kid, I explained that today you can buy, for example, that many, okay, video game, my kid's age is, so you can buy this one video game, but for example, after 5 years, you might get only the add-on for that money. So that's what I try to explain him, and then saying that if you buy a piece of this kind of a, let's say, real estate or gold, you could hedge yourself against this kind of value debasement. And now we enable people to just get easier into this kind of savings. So that's how I would basically put it.
So first, you'll send the kid through the economic school and explain him what debasement and and currencies.
So
basically,
that's for me. That's the trick that I've trained him from, like, I don't know, when he was 5 or something. That we have problems here, and and he's playing. By the way, he's playing a lot of, like 10 years already, like Minecraft. So actually, he gets the economical stuff quite well, because on these servers they play a lot, and then there's a lot of trading happening and whatnot. So it's quite interesting.
Well, so basically, just to sum it up, what you're saying is that the problem that you're solving is that individuals do not have a trusted place to store their wealth so that it will not go away over time. And I guess the solution to that is, in your guys' perspective, real estate, right? So how do we turn real estate into a currency is really what you're doing. If we were to make it as basic as possible, how do we make real estate into a tradable currency, just like we do with the United States dollar or euro, or insert paper money here? Because real estate doesn't have endless printing going on. We do have more real estate being created, but we also have more people being created. So the demand for housing is going up every single day. There's more people being born, they grow up, they need somewhere to live. That's where the demand for houses come from.
And
it's very much
actually and we don't have to look far from how we can actually create this, because we are from Estonia, and Estonia's kroon, which was the national fiat currency, used to be backed by forests. So it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel here on how can we turn real estate into a currency that is exchangeable and can be used as payments. And basically, in a way, the how part of this question is very similar to what central banks do. So you issue banknotes, in which in our case is a digital note, and you back it with assets, which in our case is commercial real estate. And you don't walk into a bank with a banknote and ask for a piece of your forest or a gold bar. It's not yours. What you get is the value transfer, but not the ownership transfer, right? So it's very, very similar on the face of it.
Okay. And I guess another question I want to dive into before I dive deeper into how is, what's wrong with us just using gold as that store of value? Why do we need to go and use something like real estate in order to be that, that currency that we trade as a form of medium of exchange?
Yeah, so gold is, no, you want to take it? Go for it.
No, go ahead.
I was funny you asked it. I just published an article about this. We did some research on gold being used as hedge against inflation. And in general, like, what are the key ingredients for an asset to be a hedge? So, like, demystifying it, what is a hedge against inflation even? Let's define it, right? So it's these are something that gold still meets, and it is no doubt a great asset to be in volatile times, and in interesting market times, for sure. But what comes out of this quite recent research is that gold as a hedge against inflation depends on the time and the place. So it's locale dependent. It depends on the country you're in. It depends on the culture very much. Like in older countries, gold is still considered, like let's take China, it's still considered as a huge part of the cultural question. Like you want to buy gold because it has a cultural meaning behind it, not necessarily a practical one. But if you start looking into it from a hedge perspective, then it turns out it's not that great. Whereas in some other countries, it works well. Then the other part is that, okay, even if it works as a hedge, how can you get access to it, and etc. So when you look at the real estate from the other side, commercial real estate, then the biggest difference between gold and commercial real estate is that in times of high inflation, actually real estate prices go up as well. So rental yield goes up, which means that the value goes up. And it's related with inflation. And there's no cost to keep. It makes you money, whereas gold is cost to keep. You have to pay the banks to hold it. There's a lot of fees involved in it, and etc. So these are kind of the main differences. But maybe Neeme wants to add something on top of that.
Only a fun fact: if you ask ChatGPT, which is a popular tool these days, you actually get the gold and real estate as the best hedges against inflation. So you both probably would need to have both in your portfolio. It would be a good idea.
That's a good answer too. ¿Por qué no los dos? You know, why not both?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's what we are saying always. Some people ask that, okay, how you compare to Bitcoin even? We say that, fine, we are not competing Bitcoin. We actually are complementary products. It's not that we want to be we want to replace everything else. No, far from it. That would not be a good idea, I would say.
Exactly. Yoni, it sounded like you wanted to jump into something real quick.
Yeah. So okay. So from my understanding so far is that gold, it's not something that it is as tangible. You can transfer, from person to person. There's a lot of fees associated with it. And from the past or historical past, at least recently, it hasn't really held up that well relative to inflation, because it's also due to price manipulation by, Wall Street and all these big banks. But with real estate, the problem with real estate is that it has high entry barriers, meaning that a normal person can't just go ahead and buy a house tomorrow, right? But how do they store this value that they, work hard and keep? And from my understanding is you guys are trying to have this currency that is backed by real estate that, is different from what the inflation does. As inflation goes up, the value of your real estate stays the same or continues to increase, more with the inflation, rather than being subjugated to the US dollar or any other, national currency today that debases your value. Is that a good understanding?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you brought out a very good point that gold ultimately can be centralized by key players like diamonds. You can dig it up and transport and keep it, control the supply. And with real estate, it's quite hard to move the building. So it is in a way quite a decentralized asset class to have, because everybody needs it, everybody uses it, it's everywhere, and you have different actors and different stakeholders involved in the. If you take like Eurozone commercial real estate, it's very hard to play the market, so to speak, in the entirety of their portfolios. In a way, it's much more stable for that as well.
Okay, so that actually brings up a question that actually brings us perfectly into the next topic that I want to dive into, which is how you guys are tying the value of this new currency, if you will, RedCurry, the currency, into real estate. So because you were mentioning that, what popped into my mind when you were talking about that is that a lot of the gold is owned just by banks and by countries and stuff like that. And that kind of like centralizes the ownership of gold. Now, real estate, on the other hand, there's a lot of people that sovereignly own their own real estate, right? They own their own house because they've purchased it and they've paid off the mortgage. So now they don't have to deal with the bank anymore. Now, there is still probably the majority of homes that are owned by banks still, right? And large financial institutions and stuff like that. But while going through that thought process, what popped into my mind was, oh yeah, it makes sense. Well, this would be a lot more decentralized because people own their own homes. But then I was thinking about how you guys are tying the value of this currency to real estate, which I believe you guys like would have like a trust of real estate inside of it, meaning that you guys, and this is something I just might need some more clarification on. Would that mean that you guys own that crypto? I mean, you guys own that real estate, which then almost sounds just as centralized as gold. But you guys probably
very centralized. Yeah, no, no. Very good question. That boils down to exactly like you said, on a basically on a legal, some sort of a legal structure as well then, and why we are then therefore also different from other, let's say, real estate fractionalization projects or etc., which many of them, let's say, many of them are then done through some sort of trustee and etc. So how are we different in there? So I would perhaps start that our safety is based on a trusted legal framework. Actually, that, funny enough, wealthy families have used for decades, maybe even centuries, and so we own the real estate, yes, but not actually we. Basically, we create a legal structure where the token holder becomes the ultimate beneficiary. So we create the trust, ownerless trust foundation, which is possible in many European, Central European old money countries, so-called old money countries, where you can create these kind of trusts, renounce the ownership, create an articles of association deed basically that is immutable, and we have found a way and then designed a structure where the token is therefore written into this deed as an ultimate beneficiary. So now all the money entering the system is invested into real estate, RedCurry gets minted, and if something would go wrong, then reverse has to happen and there is no other way for the money to exit the system. Now then, yes, that has to be governed. And then these kind of trusts, like many wealthy families, then have boards, and then kind of, let's keep it very simple. It's kind of like self-electing board, and it's quite independent. And then the family has certain say over the board, or kind of, first of all, they are like a supervisor for the board, that they have to follow the rules that have been written into the deed. And then if board would start to mess up things, then the family has the right to call the board back and elect a new one. But otherwise, the board is rather independent. In our case, the family is us, our development company first, that then becomes decentralized governance body. And then that's where our community, the people also who probably then would hold RedCurry, could also participate in the governance and then be the watchdog over the board, and we'll see that the board fulfills their obligation. And then that's basically that the whole thing is built on.
Okay, so you guys have obviously the governance structure, decision making, right, which is based on a time-weighted conviction voting system, right?
Yeah, correct.
And so now, regarding this, how exactly are the governance process selected? Meaning, how are members selected in part of the government? Is it by owning the governance token? Is it by putting a governance proposal and choosing, stating themselves why they want to be elected and having the community vote? Like, how does that structure begin in the first place?
Yeah, so it's governed by, like many other decentralized organizations, it's governed by the governance token, which is a separate token to RedCurry. And owning that token gives you ability to vote on different matters that revolve around RedCurry. So this can be protocol decisions. This can be, for example, transaction fee questions, treasury management questions. And treasury here, I mean, not necessarily not the reserve assets for RedCurry, but treasury as in what the DAO makes. There will be revenue to the DAO, and what that money will be used for. That can be part of the governance decisions, and then everything in between related with more of the on-chain questions, right? So yeah, like you said, it's a conviction voting model. Decided to go with that mostly because of its simplicity. compared to like quadratic voting, for example, which is a bit more complicated, complex, and it's not really justified fully if it's kind of service purpose and so on. So and that gives you the right to vote on these matters on vote on our voting platform. So it works very similar to what many DAOs already do, and we're not reinventing the wheel here. We just spend a lot of time waiting, designing a system that we can avoid plutocracy or avoid civil attacks and so on. So this conviction voting was the best option to go for.
Okay.
So it sounds like this process is beneficial to have DAOs like a council or a DAO to kind of like oversee the whole process and making sure everything is running smoothly and identify any problems that need to be addressed, and etc. So it's almost like you guys are creating a business that's beneficiary for specific councils and DAOs to manage and do specific tasks of this project. And in
John,
that way,
you're absolutely right, and you're absolutely right. And if you look at what the kind of a business we are in, then it's trust. RedCurry will be only adapted into the market when people trust the system. And so in a way, that system has to be built in a trustless model, but also that to evolve everybody. And the best way to bring everybody on board is also giving them power in a way, and that's exactly why we decided to do that. So we would have another watchdog on top of everything else. We are actually governed by the courts as well, like Neeme mentioned before. We can make decisions that go against the immutable deed of the foundation, which is ownerless. So we can't do anything against it. So the courts will watch over us. But we wanted to have a public, more an optical view into us as well, so that then we decided to open source everything. All the software that we run on is open source. All the legal structures that we work on, everything is published, peer reviewed, and then ultimately bringing the people in to actually speak and vote and have power over the decision making as well is important, we believe.
Absolutely, that's a great answer. So speaking of trust, right? In order to build trust, you need transparency in any system. So speaking of transparency, can you provide like details on like how RedCurry's approach to reinvesting the proceeds back into the system sets it apart from like other stable coins? And then like also what factors determine like the holding of the RedCurry mints, like in terms of minting new tokens and burning existing ones, and how does it like ensure alignment with the real estate?
Absolutely. So I can kind of kick it off. Kaspar will take it over when it gets a bit more technical, since he's our CTO and then building the whole platform for that part.
That's why we have both of you.
Yeah. And then so on theoretical level, that is also the whole purpose of this legal structure too. So the core idea here is that it has to be fully transparent, because we want to create something that lives longer than us, carries value lifetimes or basically generations. Could be a tool that stores the wealth for generations in that sense. So therefore we have to design the governance very carefully, and then we have to be fully transparent at how the whole structure is run, and then what asset it has, and etc. So the whole idea is that all the money that gets into the system is then immediately counted for. It's like proof of reserves, and then it immediately gets reported on the chain. So basically, if it enters as a cash first, it's reported and becomes cash reserves on chain, and then it's invested into real estate. We can get later into the whole real estate investment strategy as well, etc. And then we report all the real estate assets on chain, and then same happens when the real estate then generates revenue, rental income. That then this is obviously reported and then gets put on chain. And then everything, there is like 12 reporting months, and the 13th will be the audited report as well. So, and yeah, everything is transparent. And basically, RedCurry itself is then minted against the reserves, the net asset value of our reserves.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I'm choppy or this camera still works for me, but just to summarize it very clearly, everything is open sourced, and RedCurry can only be issued or redeemed through a smart contract, which we call a governor contract. And so it cannot mint or issue RedCurry if we don't have the necessary reserves. So the reserves come in, the governor contract checks the net asset value and decides what is the value of the token now based on the supply. And then it issues more supply with that price. And because that is an open source, everybody can publicly audit what is actually currently being minted. We cannot wake up someday and just go, oh, let's mint some more. We don't. And the token contract obviously is also open source, so everybody can see who actually minted, and this is only the governor contract. So it's a really technically solid to that. And of course, ultimately, if I really want to, I can swap out the contracts and make some shenanigans, but then this is all public information and on the public domain. So if you're interacting with the RedCurry system, you can always have public auditability built into it, and no humans can in that way overwrite that.
Okay. So I want to real quick, I want to kind of summarize the answer to the previous question that I asked about the decentralization and centralization side of things. Is the reason that it is decentralized is because the trust that owns the real estate that's a decentralized trust, if you will. So is that governed by a DAO?
Correct.
It's yes. So it's a decentralized trust in a way that because there's no owners, there is nobody benefiting from that trust. And because there's nobody benefiting from it, there's no UBOs or ultimate beneficiary owners. Then the question is, where do the assets go if something gets liquidated, right? What do we do with the money that's on, or with the real estate that the trust owns? So now the deed tells you what it will be used for. And the deed tells you that it can only be used to buy back tokens. So now the token holders effectively become the UBO. And because token holders can obviously be decentralized group of people, then naturally it is in a way decentralized. So it's like a very old analog version of a DAO. And then to bring in the governance part, then running RedCurry, we're gonna have every day some decisions that we need to be made, like how do we approach marketing, how do we approach liquidity pools, what sort of investments we make in terms of developing the technology or developing the team, etc., partners and so on. So these are all the things that you can actually put on vote for publicly, right? And that's why we created the DAO, that is a supplementary thing to the governance, to the foundation. So the foundation can survive on its own. We don't need the DAO necessarily for that, but it's more of building the community and engaging people who are then using RedCurry for them to also have a say in how RedCurry gets marketed and built. But structurally and functionally, they operate separately and can survive on their own fully.
So I see a lot of similarities between that and the governance ecosystem in the Cosmos. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but we have a situation where now there's sub DAOs that are aiming to tackle like different functions of the blockchain. One is for maybe grant distribution, maybe another one is for marketing, but also you have the governance protocol where people can submit their own governance proposals, or even the foundation to say, hey, we would like to implement this update. Do you agree or disagree? So you guys are kind of taking a similar approach in this matter, but rather than being subjugated to a blockchain, you guys are dealing specifically with real estate.
Basically.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. So we talked about the problem that you guys are solving. We're attaching a currency to real estate, because if you wanted to trade real estate and exchange real estate for, I don't know, a toothbrush, you can't exactly buy a toothbrush with real estate. And that is inherently the problem that we're looking to solve here, is to have real estate be a transferable medium of exchange, but more importantly, be a way for us to store wealth that is more fractional, if you will. You can't just like sell a brick from your house if you wanted to trade for something. So that's really what we're looking to do here, is turn real estate into a currency. So now we've talked a little bit about the where that value comes from, right? So the value that the currency is attached to is real estate that is in a trust. Now, the problem that every crypto native then runs into is, okay, well, isn't that trust owned by somebody? Which means that that base from where the value is coming from is now a centralized entity. So now how is this any better than the Federal Reserve? But you guys have solved that problem by utilizing a decentralized trust model. So that is not owned by a specific person, so that we can appease the individuals that would be worried about centralized concerns. So now that we've kind of gone through that and we know where the value is coming from, how do we tether the two together? How is that, if you guys can make this a more visual experience for us and for the people that are listening, how are we tying the value of this currency to the value of the real estate? And I know how technical you guys are. You guys have a deep understanding of this. If you could explain how you guys are attaching the value of this currency to the real estate that's in the trust to somebody that doesn't even understand blockchain-based technology, how would you explain that to them?
Maybe I can start, and then Neeme can help me out later on. So in a very simple terms, a price of something or value of something derives from its supply. And then when it's backed by something, the value of whatever is backing it, right? So now the question is, how do you control the supply so that you wouldn't devalue something against the net asset value of whatever it is it's backing it? So in our case, there is one side is the legal part. So by the deeds that we write in and that are immutable and open source and the public domain, we cannot do that. We're not allowed to do that. And that's covered by the court. So we have a certain legal, we are legally binding and required to follow that, basically. That's the legal side of things. Now, the technical side is what I was explaining before as well, that you technically cannot mint or change the supply of the currency without having to inject more assets into the system. In other words, increase the reserve assets. Or if you want to decrease the supply, you have to remove the reserve assets or decrease the value of the reserve assets. And that's always done through a software. And that software is always open source, so everybody can see what code is running at one specific time. And if somebody changes it, everybody can see it. So that's basically technology and laws regulating how the supply can or cannot change. And through that, you control the value of the individual token as well. So that's kind of the trying to do the best I can to simplify it. I'm not sure I'm doing a great job here, but that's kind of the gist of it. And maybe Neeme can add on top of that how he sees this in a simple way.
Perhaps through a little example here, then, that what Kaspar technically explained is that, let's say, although let's say RedCurry initially will be euro-based, but let's switch for a sake of simplicity, maybe we use dollars at the moment. So when $1 million enters our treasury, then let's say at that stage, $1 equals 1 RedCurry. We buy 1 million worth of real estate, and we basically then, therefore, our contract means million RedCurries. Now this real estate earns, let's say, 5% rental income over the next year. So there will be assets worth of 1,050,000. And then therefore, basically 1 RedCurry now is worth $1.5. And now when, let's say, the supply is same. There are still 1 million RedCurries, but it's just worth now 1.5. 1.05. And when now the only way that RedCurry supply can increase is that another million enters the system, and we buy new real estate. But now the new amount of it's late here, and then I can't do the math by heart at the moment. But basically, we won't mint 1 million RedCurries anymore. But now we would mint 900,000 something. Maybe got for the calculator at hand, but at this current net asset value. So that's how we keep the let's say it won't dilute the previous holders of RedCurry, basically. I hope this
question on
yeah,
that makes sense. So what you basically said is, like, if you have $1 million entering and you buy a current property that's worth $1 million, and now it gained maybe 50,000 or 100,000 in rental income, now you have technically $1 million and 100,000, right? So when another million enters, you would only need 900,000 instead of $1 million to keep the stable value of it. But in return, if you were to trade this RedCurry token for $1, it would be one RedCurry to $1.1 in terms of exchange revenue, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Well, so the value of a single token is the net asset value of the entire reserve asset divided by the supply. And if the net asset value goes up and the supply stays the same, then the face value of the token goes up, right? Exactly. So it's all about controlling the value of the reserve assets and controlling supply, and making sure that we or anybody else cannot increase or decrease the supply that is not correspondingly changing the NAV as well. With the exception of what Neeme mentioned, obviously our reserve assets are yield generative, and that only benefits the token holder because we increase the NAV without increasing the supply, right? So that's basically the pegging mechanism between real estate, its value, and the currency, which is RedCurry.
Got it. Okay. So you basically explained how it's tied to the net asset value, and then how to regarding the fluctuations. So in the real estate market, let's say we have a real estate crash, and now the market is worth much less than it's worth yesterday. Like how would that ensure the stability of the peg?
That's a good question. So there is a very, very important part is that first of all, in our case, we don't initially touch, at least initially, I don't know how long it might, we don't touch residential real estate. Residential real estate is much more fluctuating. It's very, very dependent on loan market, credit markets. So it's basically driven by it. Not to say that commercial real estate is not affected. Obviously it is as well, quite a bit. But the big difference there is that commercial real estate value is calculated based on the yield it generates. Now that's why we build everything on commercial real estate. So now the other important part is that yes, it's valuated based on the yield it generates, but it also is important that how you basically measure the value. How is the valuation done? Now if classical funds, if you look at the classical real estate funds, they are very much they're profit driven. Their management is driven by their bonuses. The fund shareholders are driven by the highest yield. So and where it ends up is that every year valuation reports are taken in, and when there is a good market cycle and the opportunity is favorable, then they put the fund value up, they put the real estate price up, and then the value of the fund is increased, so to say. So, but there is actually an alternative too. Alternative is that you book your real estate at the value of the purchase price, and increase it only by the amount the real estate earns every year. And what the end result is that if we look at the market cycles, then funds follow the market cycles. So if it's very favorable, so they shoot up. When the tide turns, they have to decrease their values. Now, but if we don't do that, we therefore, in most of the cases, don't have to decrease our value, because we have just we kind of follow under the wave, the increase of our portfolio, with the increase of our portfolio. Now, what if the extremes happens, like at the moment? So interest rates are shooting up, which means that actually yield expectations of commercial real estate are also going up to facilitate these new interest rates, meaning that therefore the commercial real estate price has to be decreases in most cases, because the yield expectation is higher. Now, but at the same time, this is actually compensated by in commercial real estate, the rental income is usually indexed. And and therefore, if the inflation is high, like in current situation, then this higher rent actually compensates for that. And in this kind of extreme market situation, when you have not overvalued your portfolio, the chances are that you don't have to again decrease your value too much, and even you might manage even to basically come out with a zero, let's say over a 1 year time period, because the rental income compensates for the little decrease of the value you had to make. So our main message here is that you can build your portfolio in stability optimized manner compared to profit optimized manner, and then that decreases your volatility in quite a significant amount in that sense.
Yeah, I think we are all kind of used to seeing market prices fluctuating, and the reason is that nobody wants to run a real estate fund without making profits, right? And making more profits than your competition. That's the goal here. Why else would you do it? So we're all seeing the market, and the market plays its own games and makes its own profit. That's also the reason why it's not very stable. In our business model that RedCurry has, being a currency first and a real estate fund second, we don't have to chase high profits. So we are a stability optimized fund. And you wouldn't see that exist anywhere else, because what would be the point of running a no profit fund, right? But we have managed to, or we are building a business case on top of the currency, not the fund itself. So we can afford to have a stable, it will still be profitable. That's the question of running a fund properly, but we don't have to take risks to chase higher and higher yields and higher profits. And when you don't take those risks, you won't make so much profit, which is fine for us, but what you will achieve is the stability.
Okay. So I kind of want to shift gears here for a little bit so we have time to get through some of the other topics that I want to dive into. So now to kind of recap, we've talked about the problem that you guys are solving. We've talked about the value that the currency is attached to and how that whole thing takes place. And I know one of the big components of what allows this whole thing to work is actually Web3 technology. So blockchain, cryptocurrency, all of that stuff. Now, you guys don't actually consider yourself a crypto project. You guys consider yourself more of a financial product. And you just happen to be using this technology as the vehicle that allows for this dream of your guys to come true and to come to fruition. So can you guys kind of break that down for me a little bit more of like, what made you choose this technology as opposed to something else? And actually, let me add on to that question. Is there another alternative option that you could have used in order to allow this to work?
Not really the new. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Kaspar.
No, take it, Neeme.
So no, I was going to say that. Well, probably it's like asking this question that probably many have asked: that where do we store our savings, and how do we store our savings, and where do we store our savings? And then if you ask, like you asked your question at the moment, I would have to say that there aren't many options to do it using another, let's say, structure or another technology. That this we're basically putting taking the best of the both worlds in some sense, and then the new rails allow us to truly create something where you can store your wealth and actually then keep it in a way that third parties have as little as possible control over it, and then not like, let's say, lend it out without your permission. Because if we think that, okay, let's say the fiat would be nice saving asset, and we take it to the bank, do we actually have our money in the bank? No, we don't. So that's why I would have to answer your question that I don't think there are other options these days.
It seems to me like the reasoning behind this and leveraging blockchain technology are two main reasons. Number one is the transparency aspect of it, where everyone can see every transaction, every report, and every oracle aspect to it. The second is store of value, right? When you store it, in this technology, you are not reliant on third parties like banks to really store your money, because if the banks go insolvent, then there goes the project, right? So the sovereignty aspect that comes with the technology leverages the business that you guys are creating.
Absolutely. So to kind of summarize it is enabling everyone to store and everyone to access this the private equity class asset, basically.
The way I see this is, and this answering Ryan's second question as well about maybe there's an alternative, is that unless you have a backing of a nation state or a massive, maybe a bank, it's very difficult to build a product where you transport value without transporting ownership. And blockchain allows you to do that. And it really is the most accessible way for also a startup like us to do it. And then kind of we were playing around with the idea before we jumped into Web3. And we were talking with banks and looking into how we can actually pull this off without blockchain and basically run against many walls. So blockchain really allows us to achieve that mission of transporting value without ownership, and through that creating the decentralized system that we require. And then kind of top it off that is access. So it's accessible for everybody in the world. Fund managers in New York can buy it, and people in developing countries with 10 euros can buy it, or $10 can buy it. It's equal in that sense. And then they can all have full custody, full custody of the asset. So they don't need to be banked, and that addresses the market that we're looking at as well. So we have around 1.7 billion people who are underbanked in the world. And there are many reasons why they are so, but they're mostly systematical issues. And how else do you provide these people with means of payment and store of wealth without having them, just open up a MetaMask account and buy RedCurry on any marketplace they find? That this would be impossible without Web3 or blockchain in that sense.
I want to kind of dig deeper into what you said there. That blockchain enables us the ability to transfer value without transferring ownership. And Kaspar, your camera, there we go. Transferring value without transferring ownership. Before I dig deeper into that, can you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. And this actually ties back to what we were discussing before, that it's not fractional ownership. You are not buying the real estate that is backing the currency. Just as you are, if you have $1 in your wallet, banknote that happens to be physical, but you have dollars digitally on your bank account as well. If you walk to a central bank with it and you require the assets that are backing it, and it used to be gold, right? The central bank will kindly tell you to leave, right? You're not going to swap it against, you don't own the gold that's backing it. But the banknote itself transfers the value because the central bank guarantees the value of the dollar, right? And the same happens with RedCurry, where the RedCurry token, you cannot swap it against a piece of real estate. But what you can be sure of is the pegging between the token or the supply of the token and the net asset value, which we discussed before. So that's kind of what I mean by transferring value of the real estate to the token holders without transporting the ownership of the real estate. So legal ownership, I mean, to the token holders directly, because legally the only ownership you see is is the foundation, right? So the foundation is the only legal owner of it, and nobody owns the foundation. So you can't possibly legally own the real estate either.
Okay, so I want to dig a little bit deeper into that, because the idea that you're transferring the value of something without transferring the ownership almost insinuates that you're getting twice the value out of that thing, right? Because the person that owns that asset, let's say real estate, that the value is still there. Like, that didn't go away, right? But now essentially we've almost doubled the value and then let that value be divided away from the real estate, right? So do you kind of see what I'm getting at right here by saying this? So just because you're separating the value from the ownership doesn't mean that the person that has the ownership loses the value, right? So in this sense, if we were to relate this back to gold, right, this is essentially what they did when they created fiat currency. They tried to separate the value from ownership. You don't have to own the gold to have the dollar, which is backed by gold. So then you can freely trade that gold. So now the problem that comes into place there is, in order for that system to work, you have to fully trust the person that is holding the ownership of that asset. Because if they did want to just go do whatever they want and use the value that's still tied up in that asset that they own, that is now being used to peg the value to the value that's been subtracted away from it, I guess not really subtracted, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just have to trust that nothing happens with that asset right there in order for this system to work. Is that essentially the problem?
Exactly. I think I see where you're driving. Yeah, that's what happened in a way to fiat. So the gold was there, and all of a sudden, actually, it was like double that. Oh, okay, the gold is not anymore there. We sell it off, or whatever they did with the gold, but the money kind of stayed there, and whatever the value did in that stage. In our case, yeah, you would say that kind of similar thing happens. But now we have just done this move that we have removed the owner, that there is no owner for the real estate in that sense. Other owner, no other ultimate beneficiary. And no one can make this kind of decision on their own like central banks did. Because if this board would make this kind of a decision, then there is this hard-coded deed that says that, okay, well, stop. Then we actually have to take the tokens back and give everyone this real value, then in that case, the real value back. Because that is the safety mechanism on the system we create here. So that kind of double splitting the whole thing can't happen.
Go ahead, Yoni.
Yeah, because they renounced the ownership, it doesn't specifically belong to anybody in specific, right? Which means it becomes more trusted by not relying on a single entity to make such moves or executions. And from what they explained is that in a situation where something like that an attempt were to happen, then they would, in the contract itself, they would either sell the real estate and then distribute to the holders evenly, or
Exactly.
essentially like disassemble the entire project that way, and it would not
Exactly.
go to somebody.
Exactly, and this is basically hard coded into the system and then backed by the courts. It's basically the private foundation law is backing it, and courts are backing that. So
Okay, so
And
the
this is
exact
very interesting, because one thing that I don't see a lot of in the blockchain world, for example, you have Ethereum and you have Bitcoin and everything, but you don't have that nation state backing to enforce these rules. And with you guys said, well, here you go, like we made a contract that if anybody tries to violate it on chain, well, our deed says you can't do this, and our nation will enforce it because of the way we wrote it. So that's something unique that I don't see too much, probably because regulations aren't really too crypto friendly here. But that's an approach that I see many businesses going to, and creating these trusts and deeds to say that, hey, if anybody tries to exploit or do this, the nation would step in and say, wait a minute, this is a clear violation, you can't do this, and we're enforcing it by our nation.
yeah, you're right.
I love it.
You're right.
Amazing. So we've discussed a lot of stuff today. And my takeaway from this is that you guys have created basically like a stable coin for the crypto world, if you want to call it that, but it's really just a asset that is a more liquid version of real estate that you're able to hold with as little as $5 worth of value if you wanted to, up to millions and billions of dollars if you wanted to, with the ability to freely trade it at the same exact freedom that you have with your fiat currency you have today, without the concerns of inflation, without the concerns of somebody stealing your wallet while you're on a train or something. And you guys have done this in a way that is decentralized, but not only decentralized, but the coding is open source. So somebody can just go, a genius can go in and read all of your code to make sure there's nothing in there that is sketchy or anything at all. They could fully audit you. You've already been audited by multiple companies, I'm sure. And on top of that, you also have backing from your own government, right? In order to ensure all of the systems are in place. And you have smart contracts in place to ensure, like built in with the deeds, that nothing similar to like duplicating the value of gold could happen in a situation with this here. So it's like you guys have thought of all of the different potential problems that could take place with something like this, and you've created the solutions by building it from the ground up in the way that you believe would avoid all those potential issues. So I love it. So I want to go ahead and close us out here. But Neeme and Kaspar, where can people go to learn more about you guys, to expand from this base level of information that they've gathered from this call?
Yeah, they can always check us out at redcurry.co. There will be also on upper corner right hand will be a documentation, a white so-called white paper, which is, there's a lot of reading to do. You can read it several nights before you fall asleep. So, and then if you want, you can then connect with us on any of the socials like Twitter, and then join our Discord channel, where you can ask questions, join in, become part of our community, because we won't build it alone. We are in this together. So there is a lot of work to do, and ask more questions if you have any questions there, and we can send you even more reading. So on real estate investment strategies and valuation strategies and whatnot.
There's a lot of interesting stuff on Discord as well. We are having a community program as well. So for the early members of the community, there will be rewards. They can be part of obviously our DAO or governance structure as well. And so we're handing out different benefits for the early members, including actually useful information, like Neeme said, about real estate and about crypto and etc. So yeah, free to join us on Discord.
Amazing. And
Awesome.
what is the Twitter account that you would recommend that people follow?
It's a 0x RedCurry, the handle.
Amazing. Yoni, anything else you want to add on before we close it out?
Sure. One last thing. Just more of what is your plan for, deploying, the liquidity? Like, what protocols are you thinking for, like deploying the stable coin? Like, are you thinking of something like curve mechanism, or are you like providing, LPing with another token? Like, what is your initial bootstrap method for this?
Yeah, a bootstrap method in that sense is that initially we want enable everyone's access to it. So with our distribution partners, financial partners, exchanges, brokers, fintech apps, we first enable everyone to buy and hold. And because we want to give our own treasury time to grow a bit, and then we will come from there, that we have always we have our treasury holding some liquidity, obviously, itself, but then the governance structure will hold an extra liquidity pool. And on top of that, eventually we actually are planning to create the more classical stablecoin that is backed with RedCurry, which then kind of enables us to have all the liquidity that we need for everyone wherever they want to move then.
Perfect.
Got it. Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, I hope that you guys got a pretty good understanding of RedCurry and the solution that they're bringing to, not just Europe, but hopefully the entire world. And if you guys want to learn more about that, go ahead and check out their Discord and dive into their Twitter, 0x RedCurry. But we're signing off.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.